Hi, everyone. Welcome back to New York Energy Week 2024, the epicenter of global energy innovation, where industry leaders, visionaries, and pioneers gather to shape the future. This landmark event, now in its 11th year, unites the brightest minds to forge new paths and challenge the conventional boundaries of energy, technology, and sustainability. So thank you for joining us here on the One Business World platform for a transformative journey that promises to inspire, empower, and catalyze groundbreaking advancements in the energy sector. So next up on our program is Andy Anderson. He is the Chief Sustainability Officer of Tango. He's joining us from the New York metropolitan area, and his topic today is building performance standards, moving from reporting to action. Good afternoon, Andy. Welcome.
Yep. Hey, Glenn. Thanks for having me.
All right, let me hand it off over to you. We look forward to your presentation, and I will join you back on the other side, okay?
Excellent. Yeah, so as Glenn mentioned, today talking about building performance standards, moving from reporting to action. Quick agenda, intro of myself, basically why I listen to what I have to say. Talk about what building performance standards are, why we have them, how you can actually streamline reporting so you can free up time for action and moving from compliance to action. And then the how do you decarbonize kind of million-dollar question, right? So Andy Anderson, as Glenn mentioned, I'm Chief Sustainability Officer and EVP of Energy and Sustainability for Watchwire by Tango. My background's in options and futures trading and energy risk management, but subject matter expertise today is most things energy and sustainability management related. So lead accredited professional, certified energy manager, certified measurement verification professional, GRESB accredited professional, and kind of work with clients on all the different aspects of alphabet soup for annual reporting. Also spare time professor at NYU, where I teach energy and sustainability management for portfolios, putting policy into practice, and that's in their Master of Global Affairs program. What we do at Watchwire, really quickly, baselining, operationalizing, prioritizing, decarbonizing, and reporting. So not a point solution, SOC 2 certified, SOC 2 Type 2 certified, end-to-end solution, single source of truth for simplifying energy and sustainability management. We were acquired by Tango last August. We sit within a real estate integrated workplace management software, spans planning, building, using facilities. And we work with a diverse group of clients across really all vertical markets across the US and more than 40 countries. And those clients range in energy management and sustainability experience from really just getting started with portfolio manager to companies that are like leading the way across multiple reporting frameworks for voluntary sustainability reporting and external assurance. So topic at hand, what are building performance standards? So to set the stage, the built environment accounts for about 40% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. About 2/3 are from operations and about 1/3 from embodied emissions associated with the value chain. I'd say in major cities, buildings account for a disproportionate amount of emissions, though. So as an example, in New York City is about 70% of local emissions come from the built environment from buildings. Building performance standards, they exist to tackle this problem, essentially. This slide's ripped from a webinar that we hosted earlier this year with the Institute for Market Transformation, who is the leading public agency that's working to design and promote building performance standards and building performance requirements and equitable and actionable decarbonization. BPS, basically, they set more ambitious requirements for buildings to meet across certain metrics, and then not meeting those metrics or those targets, or at least not actively working towards them, they carry serious fines in certain jurisdictions that may be called penalties or payments. It's all dollars at the end of the day. The building performance standards, they're not entirely copy and paste across the markets, but they generally fall into these three categories. They have various timeframes, which might be specified dates versus a more flexible trajectory approach. Performance metrics, such as legislating greenhouse gas emissions versus energy use intensity, and different requirements might be prescribed across different property types, which could be multifamily versus commercial versus government, most typically. Currently, there are 13 passed building performance standards. 8 are in cities, such as here in New York City with Local Law 97, 3 in states, Colorado, Maryland, and Washington, and actually 1 county in Maryland. There's about 40 more members of the National Building Performance Standards Coalition that are actively engaging with the Institute for Market Transformation to pass building performance standards. And that includes other major cities like Chicago, Atlanta, Philly, Orlando. So it's not entirely in quote blue states. So a lot that are in the pipeline. And while our discussion today focuses on the building performance standard impacts in the US, similar standards have been proposed with some that are active around the globe. I think internationally, for example, like the EU is more advanced with top-down sustainability directives such as CSRD, but the bottom-up asset level approach in the US is definitely more advanced at this point. Conceptually, we know why building performance standards exist and what they're meant to address, but in practice, they're an evolution of energy benchmarking, disclosure, transparency laws that have existed for the past, call it 10 to 15 years. As an example, New York Energy Week, Local 84 in New York. There's a bunch of these laws across the US that require disclosure of energy data via Energy Star Portfolio Manager, but disclosure alone isn't really getting us to where we ultimately need to be. So let's say this graph is a little bit dated, but directionally accurate and shows New York City baseline emissions in 2005, progress as of 2014, expectations from the grid becoming greener, and the remaining gap to reach the city's original 80 by 50 goal. As a side note, I'd assume that the expected reduction from the grid getting greener would be larger now versus 10 years ago due to the latest renewable targets in New York. But the grid is actually 39% dirtier now versus 2020 with Indian Point nuclear closing and the increased reliance on natural gas to fill that gap and peakers to meet the grid needs. So it's getting worse before it gets better, unfortunately. Basically, there's an incentive problem that needs to be solved, right? Disclosure and transparency laws didn't move the needle far enough or fast enough. So the next step logically is building performance standards that legislate actual performance improvements and impose penalties for noncompliance. And while there are punitive fines or payments or whatever you want to call it, the intent of the laws is not to simply create a new tax, but the intent's decarbonization to reduce CO2 emissions while creating local jobs, which politicians love. And building owners, they're likely not thrilled with the ever increasing legislation, reporting mandates, and now performance targets. But on the bright side, there's a gap between market demand for low carbon, high quality buildings and market supply that can obviously be addressed by complying with these laws. And there's plenty of market research showing the value of delivering that low carbon, high quality building to tenants. With 13 building performance standards already passed and about 40-ish more on the way, probably more internationally, more that I don't know about, all varying enough to be very annoying to keep up with. The question we get asked is how do you balance those reporting requirements with actually taking action, right? And we asked the same question at our customer event a few months ago. It's called Integrate. The panel that's shown here representing more than 350 million square feet of properties across the US, spans office, multifamily, industrial, retail, government, and each portfolio is asked not only to comply with various local laws, but across them, one or more reporting to GRES, CDP, S&P, CSA, DJSI, and more bespoke investor requests. And clearly, it could consume like most of the year with reporting, which is not what anybody wants to be working on. The number one recommendation out of that panel was to get a handle on automating as much of your utility data as possible and consolidating it in a secure platform. So this allows you to democratize data access to people across the organization that need different pieces of the data for different reasons and make it simpler to deliver the performance metrics that these reporting schemas, which include building performance standards, need, such as energy use intensity or EUI, carbon emissions, and Energy Star data and scoring. For us at Watchwire, in order to make it easier for portfolios that we work with, we established a partnership with the Institute for Market Transformation, which I mentioned earlier, and that allows us to pull building performance standard law information into our platform from IMT's database. It maps laws to properties and allows clients to see what properties are subject to which laws, calculate if you basically had to report tomorrow, would you be in compliance or subject to fines, and then visualize those laws as an overlay within Tango's mapping view and plot it as goals within the sustainability module to see where you are today, where you need to be at whatever point in the future, and ultimately how to get there. Identify decarbonization projects so you can kind of stuff that pipeline of projects into the future. And then that shows up the green line here in terms of what that pipeline means in terms of, quote, bending the curve, right, to get you closer. the kind of next question then is, what are the projects that you're putting into that pipeline? How do you decarbonize, right? So basically two major levers, right? I'm not a professional engineer, but I can speak broadly about decarbonizing buildings as it relates to energy projects. And in my prior life, I focused on electricity procurement in the dereg market, so I can speak on the use of tools like RECs and offsets. For energy projects, distributed energy resources, commonly referred to as DERs, there are resources such as solar PV, rooftop PV, battery storage, and fuel cells. In other words, smaller generation that's located on site or near to on site versus the more traditional centralized grid scale generation. Think the 500 megawatt, gigawatt size nuclear, coal, gas, whatever, that are meant to exploit economies of scale. From the DER perspective, DERs help customers reduce grid consumption, right? They help reduce peak demands, and they help shift load. And if the DERs are renewable sources, as I mentioned before, such as solar PV, then all of this is enabling the property to decarbonize while saving money. And then energy efficiency projects could be smaller OpEx improvements, just configuring temperature set points, or they can be larger CapEx projects consisting of controls, facade and envelope improvements, upgraded windows, what have you, most likely a kind of selection of all of it. And then finally, the hot topic du jour, which is effectively mandated by natural gas and fuel oil bans, as well as encouraged by the newest federal zero emission building standard, is electrification. I think the theory is if all energy demand is met by electricity and not on-site use of fossil fuels, and that electricity is 100% renewable, then there are no emissions. I don't think I'm smart enough to fully understand what is and isn't possible via electrification, but I'll be moderating a panel later this week at the National Sustainability Conference that talks about the roadmap to achieving net zero carbon, and I'm sure this will come up as a topic then. The other lever that is worth mentioning is energy procurement options. That includes bundled or unbundled RECs or GOES, depending on where you are in the world, as well as potentially the third real topic of carbon offsets, which we won't spend too much time on now. I also ripped this slide from a presentation, so stealing from IMT, now taking from Amorex, who's a partner of ours on the energy procurement side. They had presented at our customer event as well. And I think this summarizes the world of possibilities pretty concisely for corporate renewables, whether that's unbundled RECs or it's bundled RECs with power purchase agreements or opt-in green tariffs. This kind of covers everything here. I think we really have time to get into the specifics. But if you're interested in learning more, obviously reach out. And then finally, I want to leave you all with some takeaways from the roughly 15-20 minutes that we spent today. High level, there are 13 building performance standards that have been passed, plus the federal standards, so I guess 14. There's at least 40 more on the way, so clearly be prepared. Screenshot or picture here is Alex Dews. He's the CEO of the Institute for Market Transformation. He delivered the keynote at our customer event that I mentioned a few months ago, and their takeaways that they presented from that keynote kind of boils down to this, which is like get started now if you haven't already. Reason being that most of the targets are in the future, yes, but interim progress reportings and the targets basically start now or have already started. For example, New York City's first round of reporting is due May 2025 based on calendar 2024 data. And the increasingly stringent performance targets require long-term capital planning and budgeting that basically needs to happen yesterday, right? So say the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best is now. So if you want to start now, it's a cheat sheet of how we address building performance standards with our client. And also some links to resources that we've published, as well as a registration link for a webinar that we have on green leases, now getting referred to as performance-based leases. And that's happening later this week. So that is my time here. I don't know if we have Q&A. Okay, so we actually have a couple here. I don't know, Glenn, if you want to direct that.
Couple thoughts. Hey, just one on the reporting side, right? You mentioned New York City requiring it May of 2025. So that pretty much this time next year. That's going to be a self-certification, or are they looking for some higher authority to come in? Do you know?
Yeah, it's you have to report to the Department of Buildings. The Department of Buildings recently hired like 30 or 40 more people just focused entirely on working with Local Law 97 and verifying reports and all that good stuff. The reports, I actually don't think it's known yet. It's going to be published this fall exactly how the reporting is done, but Local 84 and other cities are using Energy Star Portfolio Manager. So maybe it's that, maybe it's a tool that the city is building itself. But regardless, the report needs to be reviewed and stamped by a professional engineer or
Okay,
a
yeah.
registered architect. So you can't just self-certify. And it's punitive. I forget the exact numbers, but if you don't submit a report and you're supposed to, it's a pretty big fine. If you falsify a report, like knowingly, it's like a $500,000 fine or something. And if you're over the limit that you're prescribed, it's $268 a foot times the amount of carbon that you're over the limit. So a few thousand to several $100,000 is the kind of fines that we're seeing across different kinds of clients, and that's annualized. So it's a big deal.
How well prepared are people? Or you think they're still, oh, May 2025, that's an eternity from now. Not really, right?
Yeah, when you think about the planning process for capital planning and budgeting, by the time you earmark a bunch of money, go and procure whatever service or upgrade you're going to do, takes a while to install. You're looking, you're a year out at that point. It's installed, then you're commissioning it and testing it for 6 months to a year. You're not going to see benefits from new upgraded equipment for quite some time, and it's already started in New York. The good news is the majority of the market is not facing any sort of like material penalties until 2030, which is when the emissions limits basically cut in half across all the different property types. So you have time, but again, that sneaks up on you pretty quickly.
Hey, our first question that came in was, how do you balance the federal, state, and potential local regulatory environment for BPS? I mean, are they all complementary? Does one get in the way of the other? Is there a super certificate? If you hit one limit, then you're going to cover all potentially all three. What's been your experience?
Yeah, a lot of the reporting is not interoperable, meaning you can't report with one and just like submit it to the other.
Okay,
On the other side, though, the metrics are all similar, right? We're talking about energy use intensity, talking about emissions, which is basically derivative of energy use intensity times however you're, burning fossil fuel, buying electricity, whatever. So they're not too dissimilar. There's little overlap right now between like state level BPS and city level, although there's 3 state level building performance standards that have been passed. We'll see what happens when cities within, looking particularly at California. I'm going to assume whatever is the most stringent one is going to apply. The federal standard is more of a guideline. There's no teeth in it, and it will most likely apply. I think it already does just apply to like federal buildings, so it's not a building code, right? So
okay,
slightly
okay.
different. And the way that we keep up with it, just like with most of the energy codes, is procuring the service from somebody else, right? It's a full-time job to stay on
Sure,
top of
sure.
all of that. And we have clients, we have almost 30,000 locations that we monitor across, I think, 49 states and 40 countries. It's impossible to stay on top of everything that's happening. So like the IMT, for example, focuses on building performance standards and energy benchmarking disclosure stuff. They have a database. We have an API into that database. It populates hours. Like we focus on acquiring data and reporting and making it make sense for people in energy and sustainability. They focus on these model laws to get implemented and then making sure that the public knows how to interpret those laws. We're trying to just make it simpler.
On your earlier slide, you had the map up, right? We had the 13 that have passed BPS. What's the timeline for the other? Looked like almost three dozen worth of cities.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull that up. Is a very good question. The timeline originally, oh, that's not it. This one. Timeline originally was the members of the Building Performance Standard Coalition wanted to get laws passed by Earth Day of 2024, which already happened. So that was the original kind of broad timeline. From my understanding, I think the IMT is engaged in like 80 something different conversations. So like the building performance standard stuff plus other cities. I think within the next year or so, we'll see a lot of the dominoes fall.
Now, as people become, you think about stakeholders, right? You think of the community at large. You think of tenants in some of these buildings, right? And as you mentioned, I mean, so much of building codes are so localized, as are certainly rental patterns and occupancy and all of that. You had on one of your slides, you had rent premiums from a mindset. I guess that's from a mindset standpoint. What's been the experience with that? Is that just a change here in culture that people want to associate with those types of buildings? And what kind of premiums do you think people might see? And this goes back to if there's a cost to do this, how do I go back and recoup some of this? Yeah, there it is.
Yes. I think there's a few kind of market drivers, right? I think generationally, demographically, younger generation puts more emphasis on the actions of corporates and the space that they want to be in. If we're going to, be mandated to be in the office a few days or all days of the week, kind of want it to be a place that is nice to be in, healthy, good daylight, like those kind of productivity measures, which go hand in hand with like quote green buildings and the different premiums. And I think it's just the market today, like whether it means you're a class A or you're a super class A, that you have different green certifications, that you're Fitwell, LEED certified, well certified, wired score, like whatever. I think all of that is what a lot of the tech companies, a lot of the younger generation are looking for. I think it's just bearing out in the market. Yeah, I think it's mostly driven by the desires from the types of firms renting that space.
Okay, oh, terrific. Hey, one last question just on my side. What's the origin of your logo? It's a nice looking logo.
The
your red wire with the little bump out there.
Yeah, so Tango, this is more location based, right? It's like looks like the little icon that you see on a Google map, for example. And then the Watchwire logo, colors have changed with the acquisition by Tango, but the cloud with the electric plug, actually our head of marketing, I think her mother designed it, graphic designer, and it just worked out with kind of the cloud energy, cloud software as a service, the kind of where the market's going from a cloud computing kind of basis.
Yep.
Thank you.
As you compile all of the different data points and storage, you're gonna need the cloud to hold it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
As you go through. Well, listen, Andy, thank you for joining us here at New York Energy Week. Thank you for your presentation. Thanks for all your leadership here in the space. It's an important one, right? We're surrounded, obviously. Cities, suburbs. We have buildings everywhere. So having that kind of performance standards in the codes and working towards a sustainable footprint there going forward, and some of that's retrofit, some of that's obviously new construction as well. But thank you for all your leadership in the space.
I appreciate it. Thanks, bud.
All right, have a good rest of your day. Thanks for everything.
All right, you too. Bye now.
Take care. Bye.